Hi, everybody. This is Blaine DeSantis, and I welcome you to another edition of Books and Looks. Yes, it's the weekly podcast where we discuss a book, have an interview with an author, and maybe something that I'm looking at. Today, we're going to be discussing the book Snow Place for Murder. That's right, Snow Place for Murder by Diane Kelly. Newest book that's just come out. I hope that you will follow this and this review. I have a review on this on my viewsonbooks.com. And I hope you follow us and subscribe on our podcast. That's either Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Yes, we have it on YouTube also. Anywhere you can find a podcast, we're there. Okay, so we're there all over. But today with Diane Kelly, who's a fascinating lady, she comes to us from North Carolina. And she is a veteran cozy mystery writer. Now, you know, I don't read a lot of cozy mysteries, but this one was really interesting. And she's got a lot of interesting things to talk about, including the fact that she has enough ideas to last till she's 300 years old. Very prolific writer. She's talking about how many books she's written, how long it takes her to write a book. We get into the whole situation of the ski industry up in North Carolina and the conflicts between developers and the residents, the full-time residents there. We also get into, if you can believe this, bear poaching. Yes, we talk about bear poaching and the fact that I had one in my backyard this past summer. I liked a lot Mr. Black Bear, but he was very docile by the end. So, but we have a wonderful time talking with her about her book, about her life. You know, she's another one of these ladies who has started later in life and had her children, and then she's writing now, and she is prolific, very prolific. Very good writer, and it's not a typical cozies that we'll get into. It doesn't really have the blueberry muffin and strawberry shortcake lane and all those other things. And the difference between being nosy and being curious, and how she likes to have her characters assist the police, not be smarter than the police. Very interesting what she does. So I think I really enjoy this. So without any further ado, let's jump right into our interview with Diane Kelly. Diane, welcome to Books and Looks.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm glad to be here.
I'm very happy to have you here. As my followers know, I'm not a big fan of cozy mysteries, but yours, this fits the bill. I love this book. You know,
Very special, huh?
It really is. I really, really liked it. I enjoyed it. I'm so glad you could come on because it's perfect for the wintertime. That's another reason I was looking for you. So great stuff. A little bit about your background. You know, where are you from? Did you go to college? Did you take any creative writing classes to help you in your career?
Well, I grew up in Austin, Texas for most of my life, from the time I was 9 years old on. And before that, my dad was in the Air Force, so we moved around a lot. I was actually born in Puerto Rico. We lived in Indiana, Nebraska, and Alabama. But then I went to the University of Texas in Austin, so I didn't go very far for college. But, you know, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to college. And so my mom said, well, if you don't know what you want to do, get a business degree. You know, that can apply to just about anything. So I majored in accounting. And, you know, I don't really have any regrets about that because I know how to do my taxes for my writing business. But, you know, it wasn't the most exciting, you know, of careers, you know, choices. But
a little dry.
Yeah. But I always, you know, liked to write. And that was, you know, my favorite part of high school. I loved my English class and, you know, language arts and junior high and all that. And of course, loved to read. So that was, you know, kind of part of my life, all my life. And then got married, had a couple kids, and was, you know, just kind of, you know, going nuts when your kids are little and everything is about them. And I wasn't working, and I needed something for me. So I signed up for a continuing education class in creative writing at University of Texas at Arlington. That time we were living in Arlington, which is in North Texas. And that just launched everything. I took that course and I met some people that I joined their critique group. And we were together for years, and we really helped each other get better and improve. And one of the women in the group was a member of the local Dallas chapter of Romance Writers of America. And she kept telling me, you need to come. So I finally started going with her to the meetings, and it was just, you know, a game changer for me, because before that, you know, it was kind of a dream that I hoped maybe would come true, and I was having fun playing around with it. But if it was going to stay a hobby, you know, I could deal with that. But when I met, you know, other writers there who looked just like me and, you know, didn't have some special magic fairy dust, they just had worked really hard at it for a long time and paid their dues. And I thought, well, you know, if they can do it, why not me too? So that gave me the confidence to, you know, keep at it because it was a long haul.
That's right. So that's when you really decided to become a full-time professional writer after you went to those classes and met people?
Yeah. That made me realize that, maybe it's not such a pipe dream. I'm willing to work hard for things that I want. So I just knew if I, really put the pedal to the metal and paid my dues that, maybe it would happen, fingers crossed. But, I'd give myself the best chance of success. I went to a lot of conferences, pitched a lot at conferences, and put myself out there in the Romance Writers of America chapter contests, and you would get feedback from people. And, at first I was, maybe one of the lower ranked entries. And then my entries started, finaling and winning the contest. And the nice thing about that is it got me in front of agents and editors because they were the final round judges. And then I started getting good feedback and, that gave me the confidence to keep going.
Wow, that's great. How long did that take? I mean, is there 2 years, 3 years, 6 months? How long did all that take?
From the time I took my first creative writing class at UT Arlington to the time I got published was 10 or 11 years.
Oh, my Lord. Oh, my word.
It was an overnight success over those 11 years.
Wow. Well, now, did you have a favorite author and a favorite book while you were growing up?
Oh, when I was growing up, kind of depends on the age range. I remember like very, very early on, I loved the Morris the Moose books. The Morris the Moose Goes to School, Morris the Moose. I loved those. And then when I got to be kind of a middle grade reader, I loved one called The Witch's Buttons by Ruth Chu. And I must have read that book 50 times. It was just really cool. She had, this witch had some magic buttons and these young girls could, get inside the button and fly around and do all this magical stuff. It was very empowering. So I thought that was really cool. And I liked the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. My older sister, Donna, was a huge fan. So, of course, I read those 10 million times too. And then Judy Blume books. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and all of those. I read those. And then, she did some adult books too, and I've read some of those too. So it was kind of nice to grow up with her.
I just started reading the Anne of Green Gables series. I'm 70 years old. I never read Anne of Green Gables and everything else, but I watched the TV show. I said, wow, that looks interesting. I started the book and I got hooked. So, yeah.
I did that about probably 10 or 12 years ago. I realized there was a bunch of classics I had never read, like Catcher in the Rye. And so I went and bought a bunch of the classics. It was a lot of the stuff, off the shelf for assigned reading for school that I just never had been assigned. But, I felt like I didn't get the references people were making and made myself do that. And some of them I loved. Some of them I thought, why is this, such a classic?
Well, now, you are a highly prolific author, and you're writing in what a lot of people call the cozy mystery genre. Do you agree with that as a genre? And what made you gravitate towards that?
Yeah, I think it's, an appropriate name. I actually started out, my first 2 series that I wrote, some people lump them in with the cozy genre, but they were really more just humorous mysteries. They had a lot more naughty words on the page and a little bit of sensuality, stuff that you don't normally see in a cozy. So at that time, I didn't consider myself a cozy reader. My first series was my Death and Taxes series, and it starred a female IRS agent, and she was just fearless and would go after these tax cheats, guys like Bernie Madoff, that kind of thing. And she was really fun to write. That was my first one that got published, and my editor at the time really let me do a lot of over-the-top hijinks. And then my second series was my Paw Enforcement series, and it starred a female police officer that worked with a female canine. And, so cops don't always have the cleanest mouths, and I was realistic in my book, with that. But from there, it was actually my publisher that steered me into cozies. We were talking about, okay, what are we going to do next? And they said, we'd really like you to do a cozy series, and the cozier, the better. So I thought, well, can I do that? Can I temper my language and all that? And I've learned ways to write what I want to write without necessarily putting stuff on the page. I close the door for any bedroom scenes, and like one of my lines I'm kind of very proud of, in my head, there's this scene where my Carpenter character, at the time she's working as a property manager, and she goes to evict these college students who have trashed this house. And one of the guys is just cussing a blue streak at her. And of course, you can't put that on the page in a cozy. But in my mind, I'm hearing it. I'm visualizing the scene. And I said that expletives spewed from his mouth like verbal confetti. And I'm like, aha.
That's a good line. That's a very good line.
I did it without putting it on the page. So nobody could object that there was naughty words, but yet they're there. So yeah, cozies, I think what defines them is there's not going to be anything super objectionable. You're not going to see graphic violence, graphic sex, graphic language, which in a way can make it less realistic. But at the same time, I don't think people necessarily come to cozies for realism. They come because they want to solve a puzzle. And they like learning, all the different motives that people have, what could make them snap. It's kind of like Murder Light. It's you still want the suspense of a murder mystery, but without all that gritty stuff that can be kind of haunting. And, I know sometimes I hear things in the news and it's horrifying, so this is a way to sort of tread lightly into that area and to be able to enjoy it without all the parts that might stick with you.
Let me ask this question. Have you seen a change in the cozy mysteries? Have you seen are they doing anything different? Have they evolved? Let's put it that way. Are they evolving?
I think they are evolving. It used to be, it was always a young woman around 30, and that's still pretty typical, for the main character, usually single, and it's centered around her work. And it was usually small towns. But we're starting to see, they're getting a little more edgy because I think there's, a whole new generation of cozy readers, and they're prepared for something that's a little edgier. And some of them are moving more into cities. So it doesn't have to be the small town anymore. There might still be kind of a small environment that the character mostly lives in and works in, a small part of a city, but they're getting a little broader because it's a huge market. And, I think the publishers are realizing that and that there's room for expansion. It is.
If it's either cozies or the mysteries, I don't know which one's more popular, but they're both extremely popular series of books and genres of books. Now, you go back to your series and your books. Now, friends who are listening to this, you got to be inspired by this woman, okay? She had her kids. She went to college. She got into 10, 11 years. How many books have you written now, Diane?
I actually counted, and it's 48, including novellas. And then I have probably 3 or 4 short stories out there also.
Oh, my word, 48. You're too young to have done all that. My God.
Well, it's funny because you're not the first person to call me prolific, but in a way, I don't feel like I'm prolific because I have just that many stories in my head begging to be written. And I feel like there's never enough time to get them all out on the page. If I live to be 300, I could never get all the stories out of my head.
That's wonderful. Good for you. How many total series? Now, you talked about the first one, which had the IRS agent. We talked about the Paw Enforcement Agency. Are there other series out there?
I have 4 more series. Yeah, I have one called the Busted series. And it's all busty female motorcycle cops. And the big busts are kind of a female empowerment, metaphor, but female motorcycle cops. And that one, I did something kind of interesting where it's not a continuing character for throughout the series, but each book is a different female motorcycle cop in a different setting. So it's a series by theme as opposed to by character. And then I have my House Flipper series, and that stars a female carpenter named Whitney, and it's set in Nashville, where I lived in the 2014 to 2016. Loved it there. And then I have my Moonshine series, which is set in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and it stars a modern-day moonshiner named Hattie Hayes. And I actually learned about moonshine when I moved to Nashville. I went to a place called Tootsie's, which is one of the popular honky-tonks down on South Broadway, the Sobro area. And I saw a little placard in there for apple pie moonshine. And I'm like, apple pie moonshine? Like, to me, I always thought moonshine, by definition had to be made like homemade. But it turned out Old Smoky was the first one to make it commercially. And I had a shot of that and I was sold. It's kind of moonshine light. They make flavors of blackberry, blueberry, apple pie, peach. There's even a banana pudding one now, which I don't know about that.
Well, we know all about that because we're up here in what was called the dark corner of South Carolina, which was prolific moonshining.
I think I stopped at one called Rock Bottom that I think is in South Carolina on my drive to Texas and bought some peach moonshine.
There you go.
Actually in it.
See?
Yeah.
Good. No, that's great. Well, you've done now this one. This is a new series, fairly new. It's called the Mountaintop Lodge series. What made you move into this series, and what inspired that?
Well, we were looking for, to do a new series, and I was thinking of various ideas. And this was, just a few years ago, and it was, pre-COVID. And my husband and I had decided we were going to look for a little vacation place up in the mountains. His parents had both passed away, and he had a little bit of inheritance, and so we went up there looking around, and we ended up getting a roundhouse, which is kind of like a partially prefab. Looks sort of like the Jetsons because it's a dodecahedron. they're fairly inexpensive. They put a ton of them up there in the 70s, and they kind of dot the Beach Mountain area. They're kind of known for having all these colorful roundhouses. And so we bought one, and when we were up there looking around, I kept noticing this lodge. And at the time, it was bright blue. It's set right on a cliff overlooking the mountains, just gorgeous view. And it was just sitting there. It wasn't in business. It had a for sale sign on it, and we heard that it had been up for sale for like 20 years. And that kind of gave me the idea, because I kept thinking, well, why is no one buying this and running this lodge? And, it just seems like it's sad that it's sitting there with no business. And, so that kind of gave me the idea to do the mountaintop lodge.
Now, you said you have 300 years worth of books and ideas in your head. First of all, what number is this in the series? This 2 or 3?
This is 3. Yes.
3.
No Place in Order is the 3rd.
How many more do you envision in this series?
Well, that's a good question. My publisher did not offer for any more books on that series. So I'm debating whether to continue it independently. I've had some readers contact me and say, is there going to be more? And I'm kind of debating. It's an interesting time in the publishing industry right now, because my sales numbers were pretty good on this series. But it takes real gangbusters to get renewed. It's seeming. I'm not the only author this is happening to. And I think, with the independent market becoming so big and so many books becoming being sold very inexpensively, and with, Kindle Unlimited, the subscription service being so popular, I think traditional publishers are just having a hard time competing with that. So like with my Paw Enforcement series, we had wrapped that one up pretty much, but I kept getting emails from readers saying, we love that series. Will there be more? So I've decided I'm going to continue that on my own. So I'm actually working right now on Pawfully Wedded, which will be the next one in the series. So it's an interesting time in the publishing world. There's more options for authors, which is nice, but it's also a very glutted market, which, that's harder for authors to really break out and sell a lot of books. But it's also nice that people aren't kept out of the market who used to not be able to break in because they didn't fit the mold, or, for whatever reason.
So when you started this, did they give you a series? Say, we want 3 of this, or does it go book by book by book? We want book 1. Then that went well. They will take book 2.
I got a 3-book deal, right off the bat. So I knew there would at least be 3, but you never know if there's going to be more. The publishers, they kind of see how things go, and then, they'll offer more or not. But yeah, so it is a little hard for planning, when you're trying to figure out, how many books are going to be the series. So I've kind of learned, like at the end of a contract, to try to put things on, a good ending where people can feel satisfied with it, But then again, because things can be continued independently, you never really have to do that if you don't want to, as long as your contract allows you to write more in the series.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Wow. That's great.
They're good about, they don't try to keep my hands tied with any of that. So, but it is hard to plan, because you don't know how long it's going to be. And my first 2 series had a romantic arc that spanned the series, and my House Flipper one does too. And so trying to figure out how to pace that, it can be, a little complicated. You want to at least get to a satisfactory point at the end of, each contract.
Mountaintop Lodge, where is that located? How did Misty end up owning that lodge?
So it's in Beach Mountain, North Carolina, which is where we have our little vacation home. At first I thought, I'll make up the name of a town. And then I thought, well, no, I love it up here. Why not, use this real place? The lodge itself, of course, is fictional, and so is the Greasy Griddle. There is no Greasy Griddle Pancake House Diner up there. So I figured if I'm going to be killing people there, I should be making at least that part up. But a lot of the other places are real places, and it's been fun to, be able to feature those in the books. But
do the owners let you know that? Do they comment? Do they know, hey, my place showed up in your book? Do you hear from them?
Sometimes, yeah, like Fred's Mercantile, they actually carry my books, and I mentioned them in my first book because they are the place to shop on there. They're Beach Mountain. Beach Mountain is a very tall, very small town. And so that's pretty much the only place you can get things up there. And so I have some people that came off the Appalachian Trail and needed to get some provisions. And so, of course, they went to Fred's. So it's kind of nice that Fred's carries my books now. And
how big is the lodge?
So it's 20 rooms. So it's pretty small. It's kind of like, I pictured it as sort of like the motels from my childhood where, there'd be sort of a center office area and then, 10 rooms on each side, on either side of a corridor, maybe they're, even outside. But that's kind of how I picture it. So pretty small. And Misty ended up buying the lodge. She gets divorced. On the day she turns 50, she gets divorced, sends her youngest son off to college, and buys the lodge with her divorce settlement. She decides, I really want to live in the mountains. This is my final chance to get to do that. If I don't do that, I might have regrets. She and her husband, they're still good friends, and they want to remain a family, but they realize, that they can't necessarily live the way they want to live if they stay together. So it's an amicable split, and they still, they agree to remain a family for their sons. And but she's just thrilled to head up to the mountains where it's cooler and where she's always wanted to live. And
see, now that your response to that question, what you modeled after, basically took a question out of my mouth, because I remember as a kid the same thing, going to those type of motels. They didn't have restaurants, and that's what I was wondering. Why didn't they have a restaurant in this lodge?
Yeah, because it was one of the older ones, that and. I remember too, like we'd go to them and then sometimes there'd be like a Denny's, at the other side of the parking lot. That's why I put the greasy griddle on the other side of the parking lot. That seemed to be the setup, that you didn't get the free breakfast like you get now in the hotel. It was always, some little diner, Waffle House type kind of thing across the parking lot where you'd go and eat.
I don't know if those hotels exist anymore. They've been sort of pushed out of business, haven't they?
Yeah, very few. But that's kind of why I liked the Schitt's Creek show, because I thought, oh, that looks like the motel we used to stay at.
There you go.
They didn't have a restaurant either. I think they had a coffee machine that had coffee from 3 weeks earlier still sitting in it.
Oh, my. Well, tell us a little bit about the plot and some of the main characters of this book, if you would.
Okay, so the plot I basically kind of took directly from debates that go on in Beech Mountain. I'm on their Beech Mountain Family's Facebook page, and I kind of just monitor what's going on. And there's debates anytime there's talk about something new going in up there. Some people are all for development and jobs and bringing people up there. That's usually people who own rental properties and stuff like that. Then other people who moved up there to get away from everything don't like it because it's changing the nature of the town. So it's always a debate. So I thought I want to address that in the book because, I don't know where I stand on some of that. It kind of depends on what's going in. I don't want there to be willy-nilly development up there, but I wouldn't mind a few more places to eat that we didn't have to drive down the mountain to, and things like that.
And tax dollars plays a big thing too. Everybody needs money.
Yeah. So the plot of the book is that this international resort developer comes up there because he decides he wants to put in a big resort up there. And he has set his sights on Beech Mountain because he thinks it's, been proven. Because back in, actually from 1970 to 1980, there was a theme park up there called the Land of Oz. And it got a lot of traffic. So it was a very, popular theme park. It was all based on the movie The Wizard of Oz. And they closed down in 1980. It was closed down for a while, but there was a lot of nostalgia for it. So some people reopened it. Now they do what they call Autumn at Oz for 2 or 3 weekends every year. And it's starting to sell out. So it wouldn't surprise me if eventually the Land of Oz reopens full time. I'm predicting that, but it's not quite there yet. So there is proof that people will come up there, if there's something to draw them. And right now, it's mostly the ski resort, and people will come in the summer to go to the ski resort to ride mountain bikes down the ski slopes. But, there's not a year round something to draw people. People come for leaves in the fall, but the developer thinks, okay, if we put a big resort up here with all kinds of amenities like helicopter tours of the Blue Ridge Parkway and things like that, we can get a lot of people up here. And of course, some of the locals are up in arms about that because they're afraid of the effect on wildlife, the more traffic, more noise, interrupting the peace of the community. So that's, part of the conflict, and Misty herself, she feels kind of a little guilty hosting this guy when she realizes that it's upsetting her neighbors, so. And then, of course, the developer ends up dead, and we got to figure out, is it a local? Is it one of the guests? There's some guests that seem a little suspicious. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? You never know. Well, one of the things you got chapters written about and narrated by the cat Yeti. Tell us about Yeti.
So Yeti. The first time I did that was in my paw enforcement series. I had chapters from the canine's point of view, and none of these animals actually talk, but you just kind of get in their head and you hear what they're thinking. And the reason I did that in that book was it was kind of fun to show the butting of heads between the female police officer and the female dog. But, I have 5 cats and I'm down to only 1 dog now, sadly. We lost 2 this year to various old age ailments. But, you can tell what they're thinking. I mean, even for humans, they say 97% of communication is nonverbal, and I can tell what my dogs are thinking. I can tell what my cats are thinking. So it was just kind of fun to put in something from their point of view. And I spend all my day with them as I'm working and stuff. So I thought, well, they're a big part of my life. They're going to be a big part of my character's life. And, putting that in there just kind of seemed natural.
I am fascinated because I've never written a book, but I have begun to. And one of my characters is a dog. And he is a main character in the sense that we switch from the one lead character to the dog thinking something to another character. And so I'm dealing with all different fonts. Okay, this person speaks in this font. When we go to the dog speaks in that font or thinks in that font. And, it's mine's set back in 1970. It has to do with the music industry, and it's based on my dog, a Cavalier King Charles. So,
well, that's a great way to do it, so that the reader immediately clues in whose point of view you're in because of the font. I never thought about that. That's a great way to do it.
There you go. You didn't have to pay anything for a creative writing class there, right here on Books and Look.
Well, it was interesting because when I first wrote my Paw Enforcement series, I had the dog in first person, and one of my critique partners said, I think the dog sounds a little too intelligent. I think you should change that to third person. And I almost always write in first person, but I did make the dog in third person. So that is kind of a clue to the reader that it's the dog.
Now, there's a wide group of people who are against this, but one of your potential suspects, this is fascinating, was arrested for bear poaching. Now, is that a big thing up there in North Carolina, bear poaching?
And unfortunately, it is. They find bear carcasses a lot just dumped. They're not even taken for their pelts. I'm assuming it's hunters that just think it's fun to go out and kill something, or they might be bears that have been considered a nuisance, but usually if a bear becomes a nuisance, it's because of a human problem. The human hasn't properly secured their garbage and the bears get into it. And then, of course, once they get used to, an easy meal, they're coming around all the time to do it. Or people put bird feeders on their decks and patios, and bears get into bird feeders. So, or even leaving food in cars. I saw something recently on the Beach Mountain Families page where some renters came up and they were unpacking their car, but they left all the food in there and the doors wide open on the car as they were, and bears started just coming and grabbing things out of their car. And one of the residents said they were trying to yell to these people, without getting too close to the bears, which might be dangerous. And they said the people just kind of looked out the window like, well, why are you yelling at us? It's like, because bears are tearing your car apart. I'm sure they eventually found that out. But yeah, it's really sad. But there is a group called Save the Asheville Bears that's trying to do something about this and bring people to justice who were killing these bears.
We were visited 3 times this summer by Mr. Big Black Bear. And Mr. Big Black Bear liked our bird feeders. And gosh, they're powerful. I mean, the pole bent in half and the plastic container is destroyed. And yet Nathaniel, my son, my producer, my chief cook and bottle washer, he and I were just fascinated. He's taking videos, I'm taking pictures, and he kept coming back, and, again, no more bird food right now. So,
well, I know you wouldn't think bird seed. I mean, that's so small. You wouldn't think they would eat that. But yeah, they'll eat just about anything if it's easy. And
by the 3rd time, he figured out he didn't need to destroy the canister. He could just lick it out of the holes. And so that's very good.
They are smart. They're very smart. Yeah.
And then they would jump up a tree, they would climb a tree, and we would follow them. And hey, God bless them. They were here before me. So, yeah. Well, this is interesting. One of the things I liked about your book is you get to chapter 20 in your book, and Misty does some thoughts about what she's doing and everything else. And you're drawing a line between being hopeful and not wanting to get in the way, between being curious and being nosy. How do you handle that as a writer? How do you make it?
It's hard, honestly, because, I never want to be one of those writers that denigrates the police department, because I feel like, we need them. My first 2 series I wrote from the law enforcement perspective. And I don't ever want to act like, oh, cops are stupid and they're not doing their job and they're, writing this stuff off. I want my characters to be an asset and to contribute to the official investigation. So there's a fine line. There's things that police cannot do by law. If somebody does not allow them into a hotel room, they can't go in there. But guess what? The lodge owner can go in there to clean and look around. So I try to find ways that they can act, in complementary roles to each other. And I've even had reviewers, write in the reviews that they like that, there was this symbiotic relationship between the law enforcement and my sleuths, and not, too much, butting heads. And
isn't that the problem with so many? Well, you might want to admit this, but I find that the problem with so many cozies, that the policemen are dumber than the residents. And I don't like that. It's like, if you're that smart, then change professions and go into law enforcement. Okay. That bugs me. It just bothers me.
Yeah, I feel the same. Yeah, to me, it's I like to play just on the fact that the amateur sleuth usually has more time. A professional investigator, they've got to go and talk to somebody, and they maybe talk to them once. But whereas, like my lodge keeper, she's seeing these people day in and day out. She can eavesdrop on conversations. She can, ask them some casual questions that they think are casual, but really aren't so casual. She can look at what are they looking up on their computer, and just kind of keep an eye, overhear things, keep an eye on what they're doing. So that enables her to have a closeness with the suspects that law enforcement can't.
Yeah. I enjoyed that. That was very good, that way you handle that. Now, one of the things, there are a lot of characters in it. I got to be honest with you. I needed a flow chart. Okay, so I'm sitting there as I'm reading your book. I'm now at the same time on my computer typing in who's who, what's what, and everything else. Do all your books have that many characters?
No, I don't think they do by their series. I think that's particular to this series, but I think all the books in this series are pretty character heavy, and that's just sort of the nature of the beast, that they are coming to a lodge because the lodge is always full, and they're groups. So not only do you have Misty and her handyman Rocky and her best friend Patty, who runs the greasy griddle across the parking lot, and Bryn, who is Misty's right hand. You also have all the people coming to stay at the lodge, and they're usually fairly large groups. And so there's going to be several people, suspects in there. But then I want to have, some locals too, local flavor. So yeah, it was a pretty large cast, especially with this one. But
the book I read before that had 8. So I had figured out that was I could figure things out pretty easily when there were only 8 people involved. 26, yeah. I couldn't do it. I really couldn't do it. It was well done. The way you took your plot and how you ended the whole story, I thought was extremely well done. And I really enjoyed that. I really, really enjoyed it. Now, one of the things your characters talks about are corny jokes. Now, I love corny jokes, and I thought they were spectacular. Where did you get all these jokes?
I love corny jokes too. I have a very juvenile sense of humor. I love puns. I think that's part of what, I like about Cozy Mysteries is all the titles are so punny, but some of them I made up, like when the dentist introduced or orthodontist introduced themselves, and he says, when she asked him what he does, he's like, brace yourself. I came up with that one, but most of the other ones I actually just Googled, I need a joke that has something to do with X, Y, or Z, and it would come up with something. But I had fun. I read pages and pages of jokes while I was doing that and just giggled and laughed.
Yeah. I thought it was great. I mean, I know Misty didn't see another corny joke, but I thought it was a great bit of levity in there, and I really enjoyed it.
And it was fun to have a character, it helped characterize that character too.
Right. Now, without giving it away, I'm going to tell everybody out there that Nigel, who is the developer, dies in a very, very unique method. How did you figure that out? Where did you come up with that? Did you do research on the unique ways people die, or where do you get this stuff?
I did, and that kind of happened a little bit organically because I knew, I wanted to use the winter weather and the setting, and really throughout that whole series, I've incorporated the setting a lot. I love it up there, and it's just such a great place so I wanted the snow, to have something to do with his death. So he's found dead, buried in snow. Well, then I started thinking, okay, well, how would they investigate this? And I thought, I've done enough, classes on forensics and stuff just to get, that stuff right for my books. And I thought, well, they're going to take a body temperature and how long does it take to freeze? So I had to do a lot of research on how quickly does a body thaw, what places around there, could somebody freeze somebody? What temperature is an ice cream freezer? What temperature is a lake? What temperature is an ice rink? So
that was something. You ever hear of anything like that in all your experiences? Have you ever read of murders and deaths like the one that you portray in this book?
Not exactly. So I hope that it's unique. We always try to kill our people in unique ways to make our books different. And I did realize, I enjoy forensics. I think, I'm not real great at science, but it's interesting, when they can build a case using the forensics. But when I wrote one of my last paw enforcement books was Bending the Paw, and I had a lot of forensics in that, and that was some of my best reviews on that book. And I think people were really interested in the forensics and how that, pinpointed what was going on.
That's great. Well, one of the things I noticed here as I sat and looked at your book, this I think is the first cover that's seasonal. Do you have any other seasonal covers?
I do. A Trip with Trouble, which is the second one of the series, is set in the fall when there's a female motorcycle club that comes up to ride the Blue Ridge Parkway to look at the foliage, and it has a lot of orange and yellow leaves on there. Trying to think of all my other covers. Yeah, most of the other ones are not real seasonal, though, unless like Death, Taxes, and Mistletoe Mayhem was set at Christmas and it has a little bit of holly on it. And actually, my publisher told me, because they'll always show us the cover and say, "Do you have any suggestions?" And one suggestion my agent and I had was to add a little bit of holly and some berries around the candle that's on the table. And they actually came back and said, "No, we don't want to do that because that's too Christmassy. We want this to be, winter book, but if it's too Christmassy, then people won't want to buy it after Christmas." So I thought that's kind of interesting how marketing can kind of influence the covers too.
Wow.
But yeah, I thought they did a great job on that. I love that it, really gives the winter feel.
You let them create the cover. They come to look to you for guidance, advice, critiques, whatever. And then we see what you can blend in there. Wow.
Right. Yeah. So it's a collaborative process.
Now, was the title your working title, or did you have another title for this book when you started?
No, that title, I give credit to my friend Cindy Kirk, because I was trying to think of a title for that. And one of the ones I came up with was Sled to Rights, which I really like. But my friend Cindy Kirk, who's also she's a romance writer, she said, "What about No Place for Murder?" I'm like, "Oh, I love that." So, fiction writers, we rely a lot on other authors. We bounce ideas off each other and help each other work out plots and things like that. So, I have no shame in borrowing, admitting that it was a title a friend came up with, because, that was a nice help.
It's very nice. And again, it's one of the things that attracted me was the winter theme and the winter title and everything else. And so I thought I'd pick this up, and I was very, very pleased when I read this. Now, as you say, you've written, 48 books and novellas. How long does it take you to write a book, Diane?
Usually for a full-length book, it's about a 4-month process. It'll take me about, 2 to 2.5 months to do the first draft, maybe 3 months, and then about 2 or 3 weeks for the big revisions. And then, a couple days to go over copy edits and a couple days to go over the, final proofreading.
Wow. So you're putting out at least around 3 or 4 books a year then?
I was doing 3 a year for a while. Yeah, that gets pretty tight because, even though it takes, 4 months to write a book, and it sounds like, oh, you could do 3 a year then, that doesn't take in vacations and holidays and, all that time, because I can easily lose a week or two over Christmas, if we travel, and even just doing, conferences and things like that, that can take up some time. So 2 books a year is comfortable. 3 is a pretty tight schedule.
Now, do you have a writing schedule? I know a lot of my listeners, like me, we like to try to dabble in writing. Do you have a schedule that you'd use?
Well, when my day is open, I usually, which is most days, probably 4 out of 5 days a week, or at least three out of the 5 weekdays. I get up in the morning. My husband and I have coffee and watch a little TV. He likes to let the traffic go away before he heads out to work. And then I'll take my dog for a walk, and then I'll check my emails to see if there's anything pressing. And then sometimes I'll do a little bit of exercise or something if I'm in the mood, and then have lunch, and then I buckle down. So from about noon to about 5 is my writing time, assuming, I don't have something else that I have to do during that time period. And then about 5 o'clock, my brain starts shutting down. So I've kind of learned I can't write new things after about 5. Sometimes I can edit in the evening, but that's usually so afternoon's the best time.
Yeah, I had one lady who told me that she gets up every morning and she starts at 6 and she types till she's off to work. She goes to work a full-time job. She comes home and then she edits. Oh my God, I got a headache. Just, I don't know how she did it. It's amazing.
I think when people have to, like sometimes I wonder how I used to write when I had 2 kids at home and I was the PTA mom and I had a part-time job and all the pets and volunteering here, there, and everywhere, and I'm like, how did I ever do that? But I think, but they say, if you want something to get done, give it to a busy person. I think that's kind of true because the busier I am, the more the quicker I can write.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I'll tell you what, you're a model of perseverance and good writing, good plotting, good characters. It's really you've done so well with your career, and I'm so impressed with what I've been reading about. And the reviews I get, I love to read your reviews on your books, and you've done a great job. And you also prove that if there's a will, there's a way. If you want to write, you'll find the time to write.
Yeah, I firmly believe that. Yep.
So now we sort of touched upon this, but I want to wrap this up with what's next for Diane Kelly. We talked about it a little bit. Indie writing. What's coming up? What are you thinking?
So right now I'm working on Pawfully Wedded. I'm about halfway through, and I'll probably release that early next year. So I've had a lot of people asking, when's the next Paw Enforcement coming out? So hopefully early next year. I wish I could give a definitive date, but I need to check with my publisher, make sure that they have to approve it and that kind of. But then I've got the next House Flipper book, which is book number 6, is coming out at the end of April. It's called 4-Alarm Homicide. And that has some interesting forensics in it, too. So I did a lot of research for that book. So there'll be some fun stuff in there. It was an interesting way to die, that one, too. And then I just got a contract for 2 more in the House Flipper series. So there will be 2 more of those. So
now, do you have the same publisher for all these books?
For most of them, it was St. Martin's Press. I did my Moonshine series with Berkeley, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. So that was the only time. And I did actually my 5 gold smuggling rings. I did that with an Amazon in-house where they actually have an editor and stuff. That it wasn't self-published initially. I did that with 11 other authors. We did the 12 Days of Christmas, and one of them had published with Amazon in-house and got us the deal to do those. But I've since gotten my rights back and re-released it independently.
Wow. Yeah, I saw that there were a lot of different authors in that. I didn't know if you all collaborated together and how you did that, or just everything. You get this day, you get a pear tree, you get a swan or whatever, That must have been interesting to do work like that.
It was fun. I've done 2 collaborations. That was one of them. And then I did another one called the Trouble and Tumbleweed series with authors Melissa Bourbon, Christy Craig, and Lawrence Kelter. And that was really fun. We just came up with a town, and we each picked characters. And we had some community characters in the town that we all kind of overlap, and we agreed sort of what the town looks like. But then we each wrote our own little mystery set in the same town. And that was really fun. I would love to do that again. It was just neat, because so much of what we do is very solitary. So getting to do kind of a group project was cool. And same with the Christmas stories, too. It was fun to, everybody had their day.
What day did you have?
I had 5. So it was, usually 5 gold rings, but I had 5 gold smuggling rings.
So good.
Turned it into a little crime caper. And it has some romance in it. That one's fun. So if anyone's looking for a good cozy mystery romance read with a hint of romance in it, that's a good one.
We can find these everywhere, I'm assuming. They're in libraries, they're on Amazon, they're on Barnes & Noble. You're all over, right?
Yep, pretty much everywhere, yeah. My Budfed series, I did that one independently, so that one's just at Amazon, but everything else is wide.
Well, great. Very, very good. Well, I'm going to tell you what, I thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know you're going to be on TV a little bit later, if I'm not mistaken.
I am, WECT in Wilmington. We're doing a fundraiser at the Humane Society this weekend, so Melissa Bourbon and I, so they asked us to be on the news, and we're like, sure.
Very good. Again, thank you so very much for being with us today and taking time out of your schedule, Diane.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Friends, we'll be right back in a moment. Thanks again, Diane. That was a lovely interview. I had a great time chatting with you, and I hope all of you enjoyed this. I was particularly impressed with the book cover. One of the last things we discussed was the book cover and how they wanted to take away the holly because they didn't want it to appear too much as just a Christmas cozy. They wanted it as a winter season cozy. Very, very interesting. Subtle changes. Spectacular. Anyway, what am I looking at? Well, I'm going to tell you what I'm looking at. I'm looking at next week's book, because if you like history, like the Civil War, like conspiracies, we're going to be talking about the new book called the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. That's right, a long time ago, Abraham died and they're still talking about it. How did this go down? Who was in charge of it? There's some smoking guns that tell us who may have ordered this. It wasn't just John Wilkes Booth by himself. Fascinating interview coming up next week here on Books and Look. So anyway, on behalf of viewsonbooks.com, on behalf of the good friends at Podcast Studio X, this is Blaine DeSantis for Books and Looks saying, may all your leaves be pages in a book.